All right, welcome back to the Cody Leach Podcast. We have another top 5 rundown today, and we have a very special guest. All the way from Toledo, Ohio, the host and creator of the Creative Cohorts Podcast and longtime friend of mine, Abbott Skelding.
How's it going?
All right, what's going on, man?
Let's do it.
So we are doing the top 5 comedies. Let's see here. I think what we're going to do, so since it's the first time I've had a co-host with me today, we're going to go over our number 5, number 4, and number 3, which I'll let you go first. Okay. And then we'll do our number 2s, and then we'll do our number 1s. And if we happen to have the same movie, we'll hold off till whatever number is higher. So like if you say, Step Brothers at number 5, but it's my number 2, we'll talk about it at number 2. Cool? Okay. All right, man. Well, lead us off with number 5.
All right. Can I just say how incredibly difficult coming up with this list was?
If you want to start with your honorable mentions, actually, you can go ahead and do that because I'm sure you probably got a whole list of them.
Well, I do. I posted a picture on Facebook yesterday or the day before of like 15 movies that I was like trying to narrow down to 5.
For the love of God!
I was able to narrow it down to 7, so I think that's as good as I'm going to get.
And now you laid this shit on me?
We could do top 7. That's fine. I could find something to talk about with 2 of mine. Go ahead.
Okay. Honorable mention number 2 or number 7, how you want to look at it, is Tommy Boy. Chris Farley and David Spade, 1995.
Yes, sir.
I was debating between that and Black Sheep, but I think Tommy Boy gets the nod.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Hilarious. I think the chemistry between David Spade and Chris Farley is almost top of the list of all comedy movies. Just them working together and David Spade being the sarcastic jerk and Chris Farley being the optimistic yet lovable doofus.
Yeah, you can tell in that movie that you could tell that they were really good friends from Saturday Night Live, and they were friends when they weren't working together. It really, their chemistry as friends bled through onto the screen, and their relationship's the heart of that movie.
Right, and for each of the movies on the list, I have the IMDb page, the quotes page for each one.
Oh, okay.
And it really says how good a movie is if you can just read something and not listen to it and still bust out laughing. With this one, the line, "Hey, does this suit make me look fat?" No, your face does. I mean, it's just so great. It's really hard to top Chris Farley and David Spade working together.
Oh, yeah. I love that one. And my other favorite one, too, is whenever he can't read the map. And he's like, all right, find moron. Okay, moron's here. And he points at him. Yeah, that's a good one. I almost regret not putting that one on my top 5 now that you mentioned it. I don't know how I missed Tommy Boy.
What the fuck happened?
All right. That's honorable mention or number 7. Honorable mention number 1 or number 6 is Wayne's World. The first one, not the crappy sequel.
You know what's funny about that? There's just as many people that argue the opposite of that Wayne's World 1 is okay and Wayne's World 2 is like a big improvement. So it's really funny how people kind of disagree on that one. I'm with you.
I've never met any of those people.
Oh yeah, exactly. I'm with you though. The first one's definitely doesn't need a sequel. It's just a product of itself. It needs to stay Wayne's World. But go ahead.
Yeah, and again, just like going through the quotes in this movie, like there's so many that are funny on their own, but then as I'm reading them, I realize that I've kind of picked up and used in like everyday life. Like the scene where Wayne, when they're in the donut shop and Wayne and his ex-girlfriend, she walks over with the gift and he's like, well, don't you want to open your present? If it's a severed head, I'm very upset.
When you read it, it sounds like it would be the worst thing in the world, but when you picture those characters saying it, you instantly start laughing about it. It's hilarious. Oh, yeah. So, yeah, Wayne's World's definitely a good one, and that's funny that you have 2 movies that stem off of Saturday Night Live. The classic Saturday Night Live, not that stuff that they have today.
Yeah. Which of course would lead into the the Ghostbusters remake, and you've already covered that. So.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll go ahead and go through my honorable mentions. I don't have a whole lot of notes to go into them, so I'll just kind of list them off, and we can kind of talk about whatever ones kind of spark your interest. But I have Bedazzled with
Brendan Fraser.
Brendan Fraser, thank you. I don't know why I couldn't think of it. So yeah, Bedazzled with Brendan Fraser, Step Brothers, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, The Great Outdoors, basically all of John Hughes movies, Weird Science, Uncle Buck, Dutch, My Cousin Vinny, and American Pie 1 and 2.
Okay. I was really considering putting one of the American Pie movies on there, as well as My Cousin Vinny. My Cousin Vinny would probably be like top 10 if we extended it out a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
The other ones, I've actually only seen Bedazzled maybe once.
For whatever reason, that movie just kills me. I know it sounds really like a dumb setup, and it's just a guy that he meets the devil, and she gives, the devil's in the form of a woman, and she's freaking gorgeous, and she gives him, 10 wishes, or is it 7 wishes? 7 wishes, and she just totally screws up all of his wishes. Like, he has to be rich and famous, and he ends up being a Colombian drug lord. And just like, just for whatever reason, like that, to me, Brendan Fraser, that's when he's at his funniest. I would never think about him as a comedic actor, but if he did more movies like he did that one, I think he would have had a much more long career. But I love Bedazzled. But keep going.
And then you were talking about on an earlier episode, I heard you were talking about Dutch. I've heard of it, and the way you described it makes me wonder why I haven't seen it. So I really need to get on that one.
Yeah, Dutch, for whatever reason, I don't know why that movie flies under the radar for so many people, because like everybody loves John Hughes. Everybody always holds Breakfast Club and Weird Science and Uncle Buck and all those movies, and Ferris Bueller, and those are the top movies of the 80s. And I think Dutch was in the early 90s, but for whatever reason, that kind of floated under the radar, and I think that's his funniest movie. Like, it was right when Ed O'Neill's career was really kicking off with Married with Children, and it just, for whatever reason, that movie, like, me and my dad kind of raised me with that movie, and whenever we watch it, almost every time we have a conversation like, why is this movie not on everybody's radar? Because, whenever time we watch it, I've been watching that movie for 20 plus years, and I still die laughing today as much as I did when I was, 6, 7 years old. So
yeah,
that one's definitely, if I was to do a top 10, that would probably be number 6. That's how much I love that one.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely have to seek that one out, because I love Ed O'Neill. Like, he's he plays the sarcastic, kind of jerk guy almost perfectly. And almost everything he does is hilarious. So.
Oh, exactly. And he's kind of a different role in that movie. He's more like the straight-laced father figure, but he has all that regular Ed O'Neill-isms like in the background whenever he needs to use them. Like, there's a scene where like this rich kid that he has to go pick up is just a little prick, and he's just giving Ed O'Neill shit the whole movie. And there's a scene where they're in the diner, and they're getting ready to eat, and they've been on the road, and this kid's sit there, he's got the menu open, and he's sitting there talking shit to him, like, hey man, you ain't gonna make me do this, and there ain't nothing you could do, and he's sitting there talking shit, and Ed O'Neill's like, well, there's one thing I can do that you can't. And he goes, oh yeah, what? He goes, I could pay for my breakfast. And then it cuts to it, and he's sitting there like licking his plate, and the kid's like starving his ass off. So that's one of the classic scenes of that movie. But yeah, that's Ed O'Neill's best. Mm-hmm. Well, kick us off with number 5, my man.
All right, number 5. Going to start off with a classic. In fact, I would be disappointed if it wasn't on your list. Number 5, Animal House.
Prepare to be disappointed.
Oh. Okay.
I almost nunchucked you. You don't even realize.
Animal House is an absolute classic. I think if you asked 100 people, it would definitely be on a lot of top 5s for just overall comedy movies. Mm-hmm. Just so many classic like you got the Toga Party, you got Otis Day and the Knights doing Shout, and that's bad. I can't think of the actor who plays Bluto, John Belushi.
Yes.
Wow, that was bad.
That's cool, man. I just had one 5 minutes ago, so we'll forgive you.
his whole his pump up speech about how the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a great movie. It's hard not to laugh when you're watching Animal House.
You know what's funny with me and Animal House, and I'm probably going to break your heart. We had talked towards the end of my episode on your podcast about how some movies reach you too late in your life, like when I was talking about how Back to the Future has this endless appeal. Animal House, unfortunately for me, was one of those movies that by the time I made it around to it, I was so beyond the humor that I never quite got it. And I'd have to give it a second watch, but there's no denying that movie inspired probably majority of the movies that are on our list.
Right.
And a lot of movies that came out that we consider classics kind of, stemmed from that. And, obviously it kind of took off on a lot of the careers like John Belushi and a lot of those other guys that we still see kicking around today. So it obviously has endless appeal, but for whatever reason, when I actually saw it, and it might have been one of those things like you were talking about how some movies people talk about so much that you feel like you've seen the movie before you've even seen it. It was kind of like that too. Like I kind of knew all the jokes before the punchline. Mm-hmm. So I'd have to give it another watch.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, obviously it came out way before either one of us were born, so that it had 12 years of, build up of people endlessly quoting it before we were even born, and then let alone to the fact where, we were probably old enough to understand everything.
Yeah.
And so it kind of becomes, just
kind of a product of its time.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it becomes a staple of pop culture. Like it is endlessly referenced, and talked about when it comes to, comedy classics.
Yeah.
So I think I can understand why you may have, missed it.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to number 4, buddy.
All right. Number 4, probably another, classic that, it was actually made when we were alive. But it's a cult classic, 1994, The Big Lebowski.
Yes.
It's this movie. If you watch it for the first time and you don't know anything about it, it's going to take some getting used to. The story kind of jumps all over and there's a lot going on. There's different characters, but there's just so many, the interactions between Jeff Bridges as the dude and, John Goodman as Walter. And then, you got Steve Buscemi as Donnie. Just the three of them just bouncing off of each other and just so many, any movie that, has its own convention is usually must mean it's been doing something right. And any movie that literally starts its own religion.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's called dudism. You can become a dudist priest. You can become ordained and all that good stuff online. It's just so freaking funny. I can watch it anytime and just die laughing.
Yeah, I've seen The Big Lebowski once because it was one of those movies that everybody, it was like, you have to see this before you die kind of movies. And you're right, it does take some getting used to. It's a Coen Brothers movie, which I think every Coen Brothers movie is one of those movies you have to kind of get used to and watch multiple times to appreciate. On one of my previous lists, I was talking about a movie, No Country for Old Men, which is a phenomenal movie minus the last, 10 to 15 minutes of it. And I love it now, but the first time I watched it, I was like, what is this? And, I do remember quite a few funny parts in Big Lebowski. I remember laughing a lot at John Goodman always telling Steve Buscemi to shut. He's all like, "Shut the fuck up, Donnie!" And every time he tried to say anything. And I remember laughing that everybody could not understand that he was just going through all this just to get his rug back or to get them back for the rug. And he's like, "You don't understand. It really tied the room together." And I remember laughing whenever they, I guess a spoiler alert, the movie's old as hell, but whenever they're throwing out Donnie's ashes and it comes and blows back right into his face,
and the whole time leading up to that, Walter is giving the eulogy, on the cliff overlooking the ocean, and he's giving the eulogy, and it starts out fine, and then it just transitions to, he died before his time, just like so many young men over in Vietnam.
Yeah. Yeah, so you definitely have to have a certain sense of humor for that movie, but that is a good one. And that is one that is in a lot of people's top fives, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, continuing that theme of movies that are on a lot of people's lists, this is one that you said would definitely be on my list. Number 3, 1974 is Young Frankenstein.
Yes.
The Mel Brooks appearance on my list. It's probably, I mean, you could go back and forth between that or Blazing Saddles, but I think Young Frankenstein is more, I think it holds up better.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially like if you watch it now, like there's, granted there's not, they're not like throwing the N-word around like in Blazing Saddles, so that one kind of
culturally insensitive if you watch it now.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But just the lines between just Gene Wilder probably at his best of going like when you think of Gene Wilder, you think of like, oh, okay, he can like kind of play it straight, and then like 5 minutes later he's like off the deep end and like screaming and just going crazy, and it's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. And this is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this with you too, because me and you, even though we agree on the majority of our stuff, but we also have very different senses of humors. For whatever reason, Mel Brooks movies have never been it for me. And I don't know why. I know everybody always loves Young Frankenstein. Everybody loves Blazing Saddles. And I want to say there's one more that people always pick up on for him. But for whatever reason, I don't know why that kind of spoof humor is very selective whenever I kind of tie into it. Like, I've seen Robin Hood Men in Tights. I think that's the only Mel Brooks movie that I've seen all the way through. I've seen pieces of everything else. I've seen like in like clip reels, they'll play like what people consider the best scenes. Like I think the scene that I've seen from Young Frankenstein, there's 2 of them that I know. There's one when they're tapping on the door of Frankenstein's castle, and there's some big knockers, and then I remember one where there's like a rotating door and he ends up in this room and then the monster's in there and he's like, open the door, let me out.
No matter what I say, no matter what you hear, do not open that door.
Mm-hmm.
Son of a bitch bastard, I was kidding! Open the door!
Yeah. So like, that's pretty funny to me. Like, I remember that scene, so I might have to just strap myself down and watch that movie all the way through, because I mean, the majority of us out there can't be wrong, but just for whatever reason, I think I've probably seen Mel Brooks' lesser movies, and it scared me away from his best movies, I think is what I'll kind of allude that to. But yeah, that's a good one. I do see that one on a lot of people's list.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with my number 5 here.
All right.
This is one that I've talked about in a previous episode, but it definitely carries over into here, and I could not allow myself not to put it on number 5, is Sex Drive. Now, it's written and directed by Sean Anders, who is the director of Horror Bosses 2 and Daddy's Home and That's My Boy. This movie, for whatever reason, it's a very basic setup. It's just a road trip sex comedy. But for whatever reason, the things and the situations and the scenes that they put into this movie are so unique and so off the wall that I die laughing every time I watch it. You got Josh Zuckerman, Amanda Crew, and Clark Duke, who Clark Duke's pretty much the only one that you see doing anything nowadays. He was in Hot Tub Time Machine, and a couple others. They're kind of your main trio. But you have Seth Green playing an Amish guy named Ezekiel, who is a scene stealer. And then you have James Marsden, who is famous for playing Cyclops. He plays the older brother Rex, who is another scene stealer. Like, he's such an asshole to his brother. Like, the first 30 minutes of this movie, you're just crying, especially if you have older or younger brothers, because you can totally relate to it. Like, the opening of the movie, he walks in and just kicks open his brother's door, and he's like, "Wake up, faggot!" And like, just something so simple like that. You're like, oh God. But just for whatever reason, they do a lot of unique and hilarious things with a setup that's like beating a dead horse. With you think of, okay, it's a sex comedy where they're on the road. You're like, oh, I've seen that 1,000 times. But the ways that they go in this movie, and like the scene with the hitchhiker. There's a scene. Have you seen Sex Drive?
That's the thing. I think I've kind of lumped those movies like with like the later, like not American Pie movies.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, like you said, like there's been just countless like stoner, like college, road trip movies or whatever that to be honest, I just kind of like lumped together and I'm like, okay, I know what to expect.
Yeah.
I don't really need to see this.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, because you're right. I do the same thing. I'm like, oh, here's another American Pie ripoff trying to be American Pie that's not going to be American Pie. But Sex Drive does something so different with it. Like, just to give you an example, there's a scene where like they pull over, and I forget the actor's name, but he's in a lot of comedies, and he's a hitchhiker, and he looks really weird. Like he's balding on the top, but his hair's down to his shoulders, and he looks like he's a serial killer. And they're passing by him, and their car dies, and it looks like they're pulling over to pick him up. He's like, "Hey guys, I appreciate it. That's awesome." And they're like, "No, sir, you don't understand. We can't go." And he's like, "If you don't let me in this car, I'm gonna slit your throat and let the birds get at you." And he goes, "See ya." And he guns it, and the car dies again, like 5 feet down the road. So like, he walks back over to him. So like, there's a really sharp writing in Sex Drive that you don't see in those movies. So if you haven't seen Sex Drive, I'd recommend it. It's definitely it stands above the list of all the movies that you kind of are saying you lump together, when fairly so. Number 4 is Planes, Trains, and Automobiles.
Okay.
Now this is the John Hughes movie that I picked, and I had a lot of debate back and forth on which one, because I was like, okay, is it Uncle Buck? Is it Weird Science? Is it Planes, Trains, and Automobiles? Because all those movies I grew up with, and I can watch endlessly and never get old. But Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, for whatever reason, to me, it's like the perfect blend of comedy and drama. You got Steve Martin and John Candy, who are at their best, in my opinion, in this movie. You got Steve Martin, who's kind of like the cynical businessman, just trying to get home. John Candy's like the really innocent, helpful guy who's almost too helpful to the point where he annoys you. And just them being shoved together in this situation, and just the way that they react off of each other is just gold. There's a lot of hilarious, memorable scenes, like when they wake up in the hotel room and they're snuggling with each other, where they kind of grabbed each other overnight, and a lot of scenes like that. When they're stuck behind, they get the ride in the back of the truck in the winter, and but to me, there's just enough heartfelt scenes kind of sprinkled in there to give it its drama, which is true with all John Hughes movies. But like whenever they start getting into the reasons why John Candy is on the road, and the times where Steve Martin's a little bit too harsh on him, and then he kind of gets emotional about it, like it's just one of those comedies that has just enough heart in it to make you kind of feel. Very basic premise. It's one of the only Thanksgiving movies out there. A lot of people like, they associate it with the holidays, but pretty much I think 99% of holiday movies are all Christmas focused, and this is one of the few that's about a guy trying to get home for Thanksgiving. So it's one of those movies that I'll pop in almost yearly when it's holiday season. It's one of those times of the year where you're like, it feels like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles time. So that's a classic to me, and that's a movie that it's always going to be on my top list.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned, because to be honest, I forgot that it was a John Hughes movie. But you mentioned that and Uncle Buck, and kind of comparing the two, they're both of them have like a pretty decent amount of like the heartfelt, parts to them that it really amplifies the comedy part of them.
Exactly. You got to have that mix. So yeah, that's one of those movies that does it perfect for me. My number 3, which I have a sneaking suspicion is going to be on your top 2, Midnight Run.
Prepare to be disappointed.
Oh, what the hell? Get off my show. Okay. So Midnight Run is again, it's more well known than some of the movies that we've been talking about being underknown, but it's definitely an underknown comedy, in my opinion. Nobody really talks about it. It's not one of those movies that ever pops up when people talk about Robert De Niro's best movie. They always talk about The Godfather and Goodfellas and Analyze This. And to me, Midnight Run, as far as the comedy side of Robert De Niro, is his best movie.
Yeah.
I love Analyze This. I love Meet the Parents and everything, but I never laugh as hard at Robert De Niro every time I watch it as much as I do in Midnight Run. It's directed by Martin Brest. And like I said, it stars Robert De Niro. It stars Charles Grodin, who everybody knows from Beethoven. Joe Pantoliano, who's a big character actor. Everybody would know him. If you don't recognize his name, you recognize his face. And John Ashton, who is famous for the Beverly Hills Cop 1 and 2. And he plays Marvin. Just this movie never gets old to me. I was introduced to it very late in life. I think I was in my late teenage years when I finally gave it a shot. And it's one of those movies where, like, the first time I watched it, I was like, oh, that was pretty funny. And then the second time I watched it, I was like, I missed a lot of this funny part. This shit's really funny. And then the third time I watched it, it was like, oh, like on the floor laughing. And then it's stayed on that ever since. I probably watched that movie 20 times, and I laugh just as much today as I do the first time. And it's one of those movies that I like force people to watch. Like, if I mention it and we're sitting there not doing something and I have it there, like, I'll mention it in passing. Like, I've never seen that. Well, I know what we're doing for the next an hour and 45 minutes. So, Charles Grodin is a really great foil to Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro is this take no shit, bounty hunter. He's got very little patience. He's very brash. You can tell he doesn't really like people. And Charles Grodin is like this aggravatingly honest accountant. He's talking to him about cholesterol and making sure he has a good relationship with his estranged daughter. And just Robert De Niro's constantly losing patience with Charles Grodin is just what kind of gives this movie its momentum. And John Ashton and De Niro have an awesome rivalry. John Ashton is also a bounty hunter named Marvin, but he's a complete dumbass. So, like, every time, he does it like 6 times in the movie, but De Niro tricks him the whole movie. Like, the movie opens up with John Ashton trying to take one of De Niro's marks, and all he does, he's like, Martin, watch out! And then just knocks him out. So, like, he does it the whole movie, but it never gets old. So, yeah. All the scenes where Robert De Niro interacts with Alonzo Mosley and just tricks him, he's the big FBI director, and I don't know, for whatever reason, this movie is just memorable scene after memorable scene after memorable scene. There's no downtime. There's no scene which, like, you fast forward through. Just every side character has their own funny moment. The villain is really good, and it gets serious just enough at the end when you feel like they're in danger, but it never quite loses the sight of the comedy. So Midnight Run is, it's not only one of my favorite comedies, but it's probably in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. Mm-hmm. It never gets old for me, and it finally is coming on Blu-ray, I think, in like September or October. That's one of what's like one of the 2 or 3 movies that me and my dad would be like, when the hell is that thing coming out? So Midnight Run is definitely a movie that I can't recommend enough.
Yeah, that movie is, growing up, like, my mom, like, that was her movie. Like, that was, like, the running joke with her was that her mom, my grandmother, used to call it fucking Midnight Run. They just dropped the F-bomb so much, and it's, oh man, it's such a great movie. The, what does he say? Like something that, like I said about, Tommy Boy, about like phrases, or, Wayne's World, about phrases from the movie that I've just kind of adapted into my own everyday talking. Uh-huh. My mom, picked up the, it's like, hey, I got 2 words for you. Shut the fuck up. Right?
Yeah. Yep.
It's just so fun. And I think the reason why I didn't have it on my list is because I honestly haven't seen it for like years. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely one that, was on my preliminary list, and even, having not seen it for so long and it still being on that list definitely shows, how funny it is.
Exactly. And I feel like it's one of those comedies too, even though it's set in a certain time period, it's one of those comedies that you could watch. It's endless, or it's timeless. You know what I mean? I think you could put it in today and you could get just as much laughs out of it as you did when it came out. Like one of my favorite scenes is whenever Marvin goes, towards the end of the movie, Marvin is starting to interact with the mobsters that's chasing them, and he's got like a ransom picture to prove that he has Charles Grodin in custody, and they get it, and then they knock him out, and he's like, why'd you do that? You don't know where he's at now. And he's like, man, look at the picture. And the picture of the hotel room, it's got the hotel room name on the towels, and they know where he's at. So, yeah, Midnight Run's classic to me. Mm-hmm. Go ahead with your number 2, man.
Number 2, I was flipping back and forth between 1 and 2, but I think I'm pretty set with this one. Number 2, 2001's Super Troopers. To kind of continue the theme of just stupid kind of stoner movies. And like I'm not even like a stoner comedy guy. But this movie is just so freaking funny. Like me and my brothers could sit down, we could put the movie on and mute it, and every line of dialogue would be covered. Like we wouldn't miss a thing. Like I talked about when you were on my podcast, I'm pretty sure me and my brothers don't have any original dialogue left in us. Mm-hmm. And like 90% of them are quotes from Super Troopers. It just like, if you can fit any random quote from that movie into like normal everyday scenarios, like we'll just like, Sam, you getting a coffee? Who wants cream? Cream? No one? Okay, no cream. It's like, oh no, and that scene is one of my favorites where he's like, oh no, don't take that one, it's rabbits. Oh look, a bar of soap. He pulls a bar of soap out of his coffee.
He's like, yeah, I got you, you fucker.
Oh, I got you, good fucker.
Yeah.
And it's like, Foster bet rabbit that he couldn't say meow 10 times. It's like, meow? I could say moo. Yeah. For $20, I'll call the guy a chicken fucker.
Oh yeah. My favorite scene in that movie is where he's like, their shenanigans are evil. Our shenanigans are fun, which makes them not really shenanigans. And you go, evil shenanigans. He's like, I'm going to pistol whip the next guy that says shenanigans. Then he just looks and he goes, Hey, Farmer, what's that restaurant that you like with the goofy shit on the walls and the mozzarella sticks? You mean shenanigans? Oh, no. They give him the gun. Like, yeah, Super Troopers to me, my sense of humor, I'm more on the conservative side when it comes to stupid humor movies. Like, there's a lot of really stupid humor movies that people like. Anchorman, I've never understood, or it's so dumb that people love it, but to me, it's so dumb that I can't get into it. Super Troopers is like 2 notches above that point where I drop it, and it's absolutely hilarious to me though. But it's like it's one of those movies where if it had been in anybody else's hands, those characters and that setup, it would have been a complete train wreck. But for whatever reason, those guys, I think that was their first, at least their first major movie together.
Their first major one, yeah.
Yeah. Them, like their chemistry with each other, you could tell that they're friends. You could tell that their writing is really sharp. They probably had 5 hours of movie written, but they kind of narrowed it down to all these classic scenes and just kind of surrounded the movie around that. And especially the first 5 to 10 minutes of that movie is just straight gold. Like if you had a greatest comedy scenes of all time, that opening scene with the 3 stoners would definitely be there for me. Like I remember whenever that movie first came out, it was me and my buddy Chance, and we were watching it at my house. I don't know if we rented it or it was on HBO or something, but we watched it, and we kind of expected it to be background noise. But after that first scene, we were like glued to the TV and couldn't stop watching it. But yeah, that movie is definitely
pull your car over. I'm already pulled over. Wait, I can't pull over any further.
Yeah, exactly. Littering and. So yeah, that is a movie that definitely, if you can fit those quotes into everyday life and people know the quotes, it just instantly makes the time better. So yeah, that is a really good one, and I look forward. I'm nervous, but I look forward to their sequel.
I agree. It's due out later this year or next year. I'm not sure when, but it's one of those things where obviously it's number 2 on my list. It's so built up to me and my brothers and diehard fans of this movie that anything that is not up here is gonna fall short, and it's
exactly. And I haven't really been a big fan of any of their movies since. I think Broken Lizard is the name of the crew. Mm-hmm. They had Club Dread, which I've seen pieces of, but I wouldn't really get into it. Beer Fest, everybody loves, which I've had a few laughs with it, but to me it wasn't nearly up there. So I'm optimistically hesitant about the sequel, but we'll have to see.
Well, yeah, I would say to go along with it, Beer Fest to me is great, and then they also have another movie which not to, like, I don't think my brothers know about it, but it's called The Slam and Salmon, where they all play waiters in this
yeah,
kind of upscale restaurant. That one is, it's not Super Troopers level, but it's still, to me, really, really fun.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good one. Well, my number 2 is Wedding Crashers.
Wow. Okay.
That's cute. I remember when I had my first beer.
Let's see. I would have expected that my top 2 would have been movies that were more in the 80s or early 90s, more classic movies, but shockingly to me, whenever I was really trying to judge how much these movies make me laugh and how much I really rewatch them, my top 2 are more modern day. And the first one being Wedding Crashers. And this was a movie that I expected absolutely nothing from whenever I heard about it and whenever I saw the trailer. Because, Vince Vaughn, he had a few comedy roles, but he had kind of done a little bit of a drama stint, and he played Norman Bates in that horrible Psycho remake. And he was one of those guys where I was like, that guy's in a comedy. And aside from this movie, I've never been a fan of Owen Wilson. So, except for Zoolander. I like him in Zoolander. But he's always one of those guys where I was like, I don't think he's funny. Why is he in every comedy that comes out every year? So, but for whatever reason, the writers and the director just pulled Vince Vaughn's funniest movie performance out and pulled Owen Wilson's funniest performance out, in my opinion, for this movie. You have Christopher Walken in a great side role. You got Rachel McAdams and Isla Fisher playing the love interests for the two, or stalker for one and love interest for one. Yeah. Bradley Cooper. It was pretty much the first time everybody had seen him kind of playing the dickheaded fiance.
Yeah.
But to me, this movie is raunchy, but it grows a heart as the movie goes on. It starts off and you think this is going to be a typical, okay, guys are just trying to slay as many women as they can. And then it just kind of grows from there, and it ends up in this really kind of a sweet note. And it's relatable to people who are hesitant to grow out of their partying stage. It's relatable to people who have a fear of commitment, or people who have just constantly bad relationships and they've given up on it. There's enough to grab out for a lot of different people. Like I said, Vaughn and Wilson are at their best. You have Wilson kind of having this low-key charm in his character, and Vaughn plays kind of the motor-mouth, brash one. They have their chemistry in this movie they can never recreate. They tried it with, I think it was The Internship, and they might have been in a few other movies in some small roles, but they can't get that lightning in a bottle again like they did in this one. You could tell there was a lot of improv in the movie, which gives some of their biggest laughs. I think the two female leads are really good compliments to Vaughn and Wilson. Rachel McAdams is surprisingly deep. Isla Fisher, which is the first time I've seen her, she kind of embodies every man's worst fear about women. Where she's just like, oh my God, I love you forever, and I'm gonna find you if you ever go away from me. And then just she's hilarious in that. Christopher Walken basically plays Christopher Walken, but it works in this movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then above all else, the one person in this movie that absolutely steals it, he's the one that everybody quotes. I think it's his best role, which a lot of people won't agree with me. Will Ferrell's scene in this movie as Chaz is goddamn hilarious, and it makes this whole movie. I like Will Ferrell a lot, but before this movie, he was a guy that I wasn't quite on board with, and I feel like Will Ferrell hits and misses. I like Talladega Nights, I like Step Brothers a lot, and I'm sure I'm forgetting one. But for the most part, his movies are either kind of middle of the road, or they're just, it's too much Will Ferrell doing whatever Will Ferrell wants. But him just showing up for 5 minutes in this movie was like the most welcome cameo I've ever seen in a comedy. Whenever he's coming down the stairs and you just see a silhouette, and it's this guy Chaz who's built up this Wedding Crashers, legend, and you're waiting the whole movie to see who this guy is, and then he comes down and it's Will Ferrell with nunchucks and a robe. you're like, of course it's Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
So I don't know. There's not enough good things I can say about Wedding Crashers. That movie makes me laugh start to finish. That's my number 2.
Okay. Completely unexpected for me. I will say that.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really good movie, but I think like what you said earlier is that, to me, when I'm thinking of like comedy movies, like me personally, obviously you mentioned that you're different. Like, I don't need no sappy love story, like, thrown in the middle of it.
Don't run away from your feelings.
Yeah.
So I think, like, towards the middle and the end, like, when it becomes more of a romantic comedy than an actual comedy, then it's like, yeah, okay. I mean, the funny parts in that movie are really, really funny. Like, the whole, the playing football scene, and Vince Vaughn just gets laid out, and he's like, and Owen Wilson's standing over like, come on, like, you're a weakling. And like, I'm gonna crack your fucking head open.
He's like, if I had any air in my lungs, I'd scream at you. Yeah, that movie, like, when you're saying Super Troopers is instantly quotable, for me, Wedding Crashers and my number one is my most quotable thing. Like, I just throw out, like, all right, we gotta get out of here. I got a stage 5 clinger. Like, stuff like that. Like, I could just pull Vince Vaughn's quotes out of anywhere, and just, to me, like, one of my favorite scenes too, and like, I love how it could turn from him being a dickhead to being that hilarious Vince Vaughn. He's like, the scene whenever Owen Wilson is getting ready to go on a bike ride or something like that, and he comes down, he's like, hey, I gotta get out of here. He's like, the older woman, or her mom just showed me her tits. And he's like, oh yeah? Why don't you gotta get jerked off on the table in front of the whole family, you jackass? Hey, what'd they look like anyway? Were they real? Like, he just turns on Vince Vaughn. So, like, I don't know. That movie to me is gold. All right, man. So,
all right.
Drum roll. What's your number one?
Please. Number one. Not a lot of people, I'm assuming, have heard of it. Not a lot of people know about it. It is perhaps the funniest movie I can think of. Number one.
Come on, give me your best shot. I'll give you a free one. Let me have it.
Starring Norm Macdonald and Artie Lang, is Dirty Work.
A movie that I have to thank you for introducing me to when we were in grade school, because had it not been for you telling me a few of the scenes, I would have never seen it. And I will go ahead and allow you to talk about it, but yes, we will be talking about this movie for quite a while.
All right. Like I said earlier, I'm on IMDb and just reading quotes, and this is rude of me, but you were talking about Wedding Crashers, and I was just reading through, and I'm just trying not to laugh out loud and interrupt you. It's Norm Macdonald and Artie Lang. They're lifelong best friends. And they're just tired of, they're kind of like, not nerdy, but just like weak, and they get like picked on and made fun of a lot. And so
they're schlubs.
Yeah, basically. They start up a revenge for hire business, for, Sam, which is Artie Lang. His dad needs a new heart, cause he had like a big heart attack, and they're trying to save him, obviously. So there's just it's basically like a bunch of, I mean, it's not, but I mean, like, just a bunch of little like scenes that were kind of like just very loosely tied together, but like each one is so great. And then you got cameos by Don Rickles, who plays the
movie theater manager.
The movie theater manager that they work in briefly. Christopher McDonald, again, being perhaps one of the greatest bad guys in film.
He's definitely made a career out of being the dickhead villain in comedies.
Yeah, and if you thought he was great in Happy Gilmore as Shooter McGavin, him as super rich guy Travis Cole in Dirty Work is just as good.
He's actually the bad guy somewhat in Dutch as well.
Oh, is he?
Yes.
Well, now I have to watch it.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just I forget, and that's the other thing. I haven't seen this movie again in quite a while, but just reading the quotes is there's a part where Norm Macdonald and Artie Lang get arrested, and they're in the holding cell, and Norm turns to Artie and is like, "Hey, do you know what happens to guys in prison?" It's like yeah, I know. And then something happens, and then it cuts to, and they're being released, and Norm Macdonald's talking to the other prisoners in the cell. He's like, you fellas have a lot of growing up to do. I tell you, it's ridiculous. You know what hurts the most? The lack of respect. that hurts the most. Well,
except for the other thing.
Except for the other thing. That hurts the most. The lack of respect hurts the second most.
Yeah, that's another movie too where whenever I first discovered MySpace, I remember like it was yesterday. Everybody was kind of on the MySpace train, and I was like, this sounds stupid. And then I finally made an account one day, and before YouTube was really big, MySpace had a lot of videos where you could kind of search. And I remember when I first discovered that, I think I spent 2.5 hours, which is like an hour past the runtime of the movie, just watching scenes from Dirty Work. I would just search, and it would be like Dirty Work mafia scene, Dirty Work movie theater scene, and I would just play them and laugh my ass off just watching them over and over and over again. And like you said, that scene is hilarious with the prison thing. The way that they get back at Don Rickles is classic. And this is one of those movies, just like Super Troopers, where it teeters just on the good side of being too stupid, where I can enjoy it. There is a little bit of heart in there, but like the other movies, it's not quite as thick as Wedding Crashers and Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, but there's enough there to kind of keep it grounded a little bit. Chris Farley's got a great small role in there.
His last movie.
Oh, it was?
It was, yep.
Wow. I would have thought that, was it Almost Famous? I thought that was his last movie.
Maybe.
It might not have.
I always thought the Dirty Work was, but
it might not have been. But yeah, so one of the last good roles we've gotten from Chris Farley. He was great in it. I liked the small scenes that I forget the guy's name, but the guy that basically leases out their building to them every time he comes around. Yeah, he's like, you screw me over, I punch you in the stomach. So yeah, that's a great number one. And
with that one, they're signing the lease for the building, and Kirkpatrick is this kind of shorter, older guy that owns it, and they're signing the lease, and Norm Macdonald's the one signing it, and Kirkpatrick goes like, all right, now if you destroy the building or anything, I'm going to punch you in the stomach. And then Norm goes like, oh, well, if that should happen, that's Sam's department. And then Sam, he didn't know what happened. He's like, oh yeah, that's my department. And then later on, they eventually destroy the building, and then he punches Artie Lang in the stomach. He's like, why didn't he hit you too? I have no idea.
Yeah, that's one of the only comedies I've seen where Norm Macdonald plays the main guy. Mm-hmm. And I feel like if he would have gotten more movies that were written for his character, I don't know who wrote it. I have a sneaking suspicion maybe he co-wrote that one, but
I'm guessing, yeah.
Yeah, but if he would have gotten more roles like that where it was written for his style of humor, I think he could have been up there with like David Spade and Adam Sandler and that SNL crew. He would have been up higher in the list in those 90s comedies for me. But yeah, Dirty Work's a classic. So yeah, if you guys haven't seen Dirty Work, which Abbott already alluded to, majority of you probably haven't, definitely check that one out. I think it either just came out on Blu-ray or was about to, because I remember seeing it and I was like, oh, because I probably haven't seen that movie in 10 years too.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a classic. Mm-hmm. All right, so my number one, which I'm sure you have, or if you haven't, I'm sure you've seen, I should say, The 40-Year-Old Virgin.
Okay, yeah.
I hear the hesitation in your voice, like, that's number one. So The 40-Year-Old Virgin, again, just like Wedding Crashers, this was a movie that I expected less than nothing from. I wasn't a fan of Steve Carell. I'd never watched The Office. Everybody loves his role in Bruce Almighty, and I thought he was the weakest part of that movie. Mm-hmm. So, a movie focused on him, I was like, yeah, that's not going to be for me. And everybody else in this list before this movie really wasn't on anybody's radar. You got Paul Rudd, Seth Rogen, Catherine Keener, she's been around for a while, Jane Lynch, Kat Dennings, Kevin Hart had a small role, Mindy Kaling had a small role. And, I mean, everybody pretty much on that list, and even Steve Carell to a degree, when this movie came out, just their career catapulted.
Oh, yeah.
Even the director and the writer, Judd Apatow, he was all of a sudden the comedy guy. He kind of came onto the scene with this and kind of reignited the improv heavy comedies where you pretty much just let the camera roll, give your actors a basic setup and see what happens. And that's what gives you some of the most laughs in this movie. It has the perfect balance of raunchiness and heart. The relationship at the center of the movie between Steve Carell and Catherine Keener is real believable. It's sweet. It's realistic. And it doesn't distract from the comedy at all, to me. It's peppered in there just enough. There's numerous classic scenes. You know, you got they work in like this Circuit City type store, and on the big screens all day long they have Michael McDonald playing like this live concert. And in the beginning of the movie, Paul Rudd walks up and he's like, "Hey," and he walks up to the owner of the store, the manager of the store, Jane Lynch, and he goes, "Hey, there's something I want to talk to you about, and I finally gained enough confidence. I'm really excited about it. I walked in today and I decided to tell you that if you don't take this fucking Michael McDonald DVD off that you've been playing for the past 3 years, I'm going to kill everybody in the store and put a bullet in my head." And like, she's just like, "You drank last night, didn't you?" or something like that. And she's like, "Get the fuck out of here, smart ass." And just like, you got that, and you got the chest waxing scene. You've got the speed dating scene. You got the scene where I think his name was Jay. His girlfriend comes in to confront Steve Carell about the speed dating card.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, yeah, my girlfriend found your speed dating card, and it was really his." Yeah. And there's a lot of scenes in here that you can tell was just something that was thought of on the spot. It was all improv, and it's something that we hadn't had in a really, really long time before that movie came along. And it's kind of been beaten into the ground now because Judd Apatow, I think, has done it too much. You know, like with Knocked Up, and he had This Is 40, and especially in Funny People, that movie he did with Adam Sandler. I like all those movies, but I think that his style that he had in 40-Year-Old Virgin, I think he was let a little bit too off the reins with those other ones, because there was some scenes, you know, the problem with improv in most movies is when you let your actors continually just beat a joke into the ground, sometimes they beat it into the ground past the point of it being funny. Like, it was funny for the first 5 seconds, and then now it's 30 seconds later and it's not funny anymore. But I don't have any scenes in 40-Year-Old Virgin that felt that way. You know, it's endlessly quotable for me. But, you know, the one that I used to use in college a lot, because there was my best friend Zach lived with this guy Pete, and Pete was a big Coldplay fan. So every time he'd go to mention Coldplay, or he'd go to play it or something, I'm like, "You know how I know you're gay?" And he'd look at me like, "Dude, shut the hell up!" Like it's one of those movies, just like you were saying with Dirty Work, where like you were saying with Super Troopers, I'm sorry, that like if I can fit a 40-Year-Old Virgin quote into the situation, I will. You know?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's. I think my hesitation at first was because like it was one of those movies that like oh yeah, that was a thing. Like I think I'd seen it honestly like so many times that it's like the aforementioned like the chest waxing scene. Mm-hmm. Like it's like, yeah, like it was hilarious like the first couple of times I see it, but I've seen that movie like so many times that it's like, no, okay. Mm-hmm. Like it just kind of lost it for me. But you mentioned the Paul Rudd,
the Michael McDonald scene.
Yeah, like Paul Rudd is probably my favorite comedic actor. Uh-huh. Like I'm not gonna go see him in Ant-Man. I have no interest in that whole thing. But him and Steve Carell and they're all sitting around the table playing cards or whatever, and he's like, it's like, oh yeah, she loved the dirty talk. Steve Carell's just like making stuff up.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, describe the titties. Like, where were they? Oh, it was like a bag of sand.
He's like, dude, have you ever felt a breast? Like, yeah, that scene's hilarious because you can tell, like, and it's relatable because if you've ever been in a situation where you need to lie to feel like you're cool amongst the people you're with, that definitely has that feel to it.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't get any of that. I'm sorry.
You better lock it up. You better lock it up. No, you lock it up. You lock it up. Lock it up. Lock it up.
Well, okay, starting back off at number 5, we got... No, it's all good.
I'm going to mention number 3.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's all good. But no, I was saying, like, that scene you were talking about with Steve Carell trying to, like, conceal the fact that he has no idea what they're talking about and can't relate. Like, it's easy to laugh at that because we've all been in that situation. Like, not to the extremity that it's portrayed in that scene, but like when everybody's talking about something and you have to play like you're cool like them, so you have to yeah, man, that was a great game last week with, the Bears. Like, that's a good one. I feel like they use the side characters just enough. Like, pretty much everybody on that list, aside from, the main four guys and Catherine Keener, just have little small nuggets of scenes. Like Kevin Hart's in one scene, Mindy Kaling's in one scene.
Yeah, that's you said Kevin Hart, and I was trying to think. Like, I didn't remember.
It's where there's a scene where Steve Carell walks up and the guy Jay is talking to Kevin Hart, and Kevin Hart's like, "So I'm gonna need that upgrade and that extended warranty for the price of on the house." And he's like, "Yeah, I can't do that." He's like, "Come on, man, be my boy." And they start getting into an argument, and that's a classic scene because he just starts. It's two black guys arguing with each other, and Steve Carell just walks up and tries to diffuse it, and you're like, "Oh God, this is not going to go anywhere." So then Steve Carell walks up and he's like, "Excuse me, can I help you?" And Kevin Hart just looks at him. He's like, "Is this your boy?" And he goes, "Yeah, man, that's my boy. We're at the same Smart Tech." And he goes, "You just got fucked up with him. I'm coming back for both y'all." And he starts. So that's one of the first times I've seen Kevin Hart, and I wish he was in more scenes like that, because just like, getting on a little bit of a tangent, just like Will Ferrell, I feel like Kevin Hart's getting kind of shoved down our throats nowadays. He's in like every major comedy and he plays the same role. So I think Kevin Hart would be a lot funnier if he just shows up in comedies, like for one or two scenes. And I like The Wedding The Wedding Ringer. I liked About Last Night, but I thought Get Hard, which is a Will Ferrell movie, was just okay. I haven't seen Central Intelligence, but I don't expect to think much of it. So he's one of those guys where I feel like Will Ferrell's cameo in Wedding Crashers, Kevin Hart's cameo in this is one of the highlights.
Yeah, and I think if, to continue on said tangent, I think if he did do that, like he's allowed to say no to things.
Yeah.
I think if he just kind of popped up when you're not expecting him, like, people would appreciate it more. And because he's really funny, like he's a really funny guy. But if you're in like 6 movies a year, like it's you get burned out.
Yeah, especially when he's just playing Kevin Hart in all the movies. You
right.
know what I mean? So yeah, he's kind of the new Will Ferrell. But we'll see. He might surprise us. But yeah, that's 40-year-old version's my number one.
All right.
Yep. So that's a good list, man. I tried to. It was funny because I was actually trying to purposely not add movies that I thought were going to be on your top 5, and I think unknowingly I did that, and I didn't even have to. Like, what I mean? So that's pretty cool. But
yeah, it's funny. Like, a lot of thinking back, I don't think any of your movies were even on my preliminary list. Like, that's.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of shocking that there wasn't any crossover.
Mm-hmm. I'm shocked that Liar Liar didn't make it on your top 5.
It was on my preliminary. It was it's probably that and Ace Ventura are probably my favorite Jim Carrey movies.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think the problem with Liar Liar is that it had the same problem I have with 40-Year-Old Virgin, is that it's freaking hilarious, but I've seen it so many times that I need to give it like a...
kind of numb to it.
Yeah, like I need to give it like a good, I don't know, 5-year window where I don't watch it, and then I can just pick it up and be good as new.
Yeah, that was another movie that you kind of introduced me to, because I remember in grade school you were I think you came in and you were just like, "Dude, my mom bought us some movies last night. One of them was Liar Liar. Have you ever seen it?" And I was like, "I'm pretty sure my dad has it, but no, I've never seen it." And I remember I went home that night, and then, when we weren't talking about Alice Cooper, all of a sudden we were talking about Liar Liar, like in the dead spots. You know what I mean? Like, it was me. Like, we would just pull it out. It was me. so yeah, that was a classic one. Well, we'll have to do this again, man. I'll have to figure out another. I figured if I had you on here, I had to do comedies. Because I think we'd have the best back and forth with that. We'll have to do like maybe top 5 classic rock albums or something. I'll try to find something that we could do and have a good back and forth from. But this has been fun. It's been a good little change up from my normal routine of just talking to myself. So, so yeah, I appreciate you coming on here. You want to talk to people about your podcast a little bit?
Yeah, my podcast, which your episode should be up any day now. I just haven't had any time to, do all the editing and all that good stuff.
Okay.
The Creative Cohorts Podcast. You can search for it on SoundCloud. Search for Creative Cohorts Podcast, and it's on iTunes. So if you see it, hit subscribe and write some at least halfway nice things about it. I would greatly appreciate it.
Exactly. Yeah. Abbott's got a really cool setup. I was talking and plugging his show a little bit in one of my previous episodes after me and him had done our little collaboration. He's got a cool setup, and I like he celebrates the fact that people are creative, and he tries to get different creative minds on there to just kind of speak about their passions. So if you're an artist or a creative person in any format, I think you could have something that you can grab onto with his material. So definitely check him out. And like I said, I'll have to have you on here again, and I think you were talking about doing a top 10 on your channel at some point.
Yeah, I actually have. I actually just did an episode yesterday that will be up, in a week or so, of the top 5 most influential albums to me and my guest. Actually, since you're here, I can directly tell you. My top 5, you're probably not going to like at all. Her top 5 is more up your alley, and I think you'll appreciate it. But it's it was good to kind of figure out which albums were most influential and important to us, and we have like all these emotions to music, and it kind of draws from life experiences and all that, and so that was a good one.
Exactly. And it's funny that you choose that, because I was actually, as I was sitting here a couple of days ago trying to think of, I try to write down ideas for top 5 shows as it comes to me, because otherwise I'll sit down and I'm like, okay, what am I going to talk about now? And one of the ones that I had actually thought about and started writing notes for was like top 5 influential albums. So that's kind of funny that you just did that. So yeah, look out for mine. Mine's, if not, obviously this coming Wednesday will be this episode, but probably the following Wednesday will be that one. So look out for that one, and I think that should be an interesting listen for you. And I'll give yours a listen whenever it's up. Is it up now?
No, it'll be up after yours, which will be up either later today or tomorrow. Yeah.
Awesome. So look out for that, guys. I'm going to be on the Creative Cohorts Podcast. Search for that, like Abbott said, on SoundCloud or iTunes. Give them a like and a subscribe, and give this podcast, the Cody Leach Podcast, a like and a subscribe on SoundCloud or iTunes. Leave any comments or questions below, any questions for Abbott on his podcast or on this episode. I'm sure he'll see them. And you can also find me on Twitter with the hashtag the Cody Leach Podcast. And again, my friend, I appreciate you being on here. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.